But I think it is important that I just lay a little background before I continue. Recall that on the 20th of January of this year, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu inaugurated a tripartite committee on the new national minimum wage. Now, since its inauguration on that day, the new National Minimum Wage Tripartite Committee has held about 7 plenary meetings, meaning that all members of the Tripartite Committee have come together at least 7 times. This, of course, again, is in addition to the zonal meetings held by these committees in the various zones of the country. Meetings were held in Lagos, Abuja, Enugu, Kano, Uyo, and Yola. These are the zonal meetings in each of the 6 geopolitical zones of this country. Now, the new committee, inaugurated by Mr. President, had as its chairman an independent person of repute who has worked in the public service of this country, a retired civil servant, a retired head of service of the Federation, by name Alhaji Bukar Gwani Aji. He is at the head of that tripartite committee meeting. Now, there are 3 parts of this committee, like the name suggests. One is from the government side. Now, the government side has the federal government, the state governments, and the local governments. In other words, it's not just the federal government, it is the federal government with the subnationals. On the side of the federal government, we had the Minister of Budget, Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Labor. It also included representation from the Office of the SGF, from the Head of Service, and the Salaries and Wages Commission. On the part of the state governments, about 6 of them were also there. We had governors of Niger, Katsina, Ogun, Cross River, Anambra, and Bauchi. Now, I want to emphasize that care is taken not to include only those within the ruling party. The governor of Bauchi is not of the APC. The governor of Anambra is not also of the APC. He belongs to another political party. Now, there were also representation from all the local governments across this country. That is on the part of government. Second, the organized private sector is also involved. They are represented by 1, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, NECA. There was also the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, NASIMA, National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. All these are representing the private sector. On the other hand, there is also representation from the organized labor, including the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, of course, with all its affiliate bodies. Now, I want to also state that the last minimum wage regime expired on the 8th of April 2024. Now, because negotiation into the new labor minimum wage has not been completed, the federal government insisted that the wage award, which was originally supposed to last only 6 months, has been extended until such a time when the new national wage regime comes into being. In other words, the 6 months pledge made by the federal government to continue to pay wage award will not stop until the new national minimum wage comes into being. This, of course, is done in good faith by the federal government to ensure that no worker loses out as a result of delay for whatever reason to arrive at the new national minimum wage. Now, having expired on the 8th of April, the federal government is still continuing with that engagement, like I said. Now, on the 31st of May, 2024, in one of its meetings, which is supposed to be the 7th meeting of the tripartite agreement, Labour walked out of that meeting. This, of course, was to be the 3rd time that Labour was walking out of meeting of the tripartite committee. On the 2 previous occasions, Labour was persuaded and they saw reason to come back to the negotiating table. We are also hoping that Labour will again see reason this time around to also return to the negotiating table in the interest of Nigeria. Now, let me say that on Tuesday, the 28th of May 2024, the tripartite committee comprising 36 members, I need to say this also, that each membership, part of the tripartite committee had 12 members. The federal government, the state government, and the subnationals on one side, the organized labor on another, and the private sector also on another. So, meaning that 12 members each were represented in the tripartite committee, meaning that you had 36 members, plus the chairman, who is an independent person. Now, after that meeting, the federal government made an offer of 60,000 naira per month to workers. Now, I want you to note that the federal government indeed had to painfully push other members of the tripartite agreement, meaning the organized private sector, to accepting this 60,000, because it was indeed very hard for them to swallow. But the federal government, in the spirit of our collective bargaining, in the spirit of trying to find a common ground so that Nigeria will continue to enjoy industrial harmony and peace, the federal government insisted, and the organized private sector also accepted 60,000 naira as minimum wage. It is only the organized labor, the Nigerian Labour Congress, the TUC, and its affiliates that rejected this and walked out of the meeting. This position, meaning the new minimum wage proposed by government and the organized private sector, represents a 100% increase on the existing minimum wage of 2019. 100% increase. Labour, however, wanted 494,000 naira as at the time they walked out of the last meeting, which will be an increase of 1,547% on the existing wage, an increase of 1,547%. The sum of 494,000 as minimum wage proposed by Labour is seeking cumulatively an amount in the sum of 9.5 trillion naira by the federal government. This is only for federal workers that are only 1.2 million in number. Meaning that if government accepts the position of Labour, it will cost taxpayers 9.5 trillion naira, 9.5 trillion naira to absorb what was proposed by Labour if 494,000 is accepted. This, of course, is even a backward step by Labour. Their original position of over 600,000 will have meant that government will need to find about 12 trillion naira to be able to pay that annually. But what they are proposing now is 494,000, which will mean a cumulative payment for only federal workers, 9.5 trillion. This is over 8 billion in salaries and over 700 billion naira in consequential pension and other forms of payments. Now, it is important for Nigerians to understand that whereas the federal government is desirous of ample remuneration for Nigerian workers, what is most critical is that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, will not encourage any action that could lead to massive job loss. If this amount is accepted, many people in the private sector will not be able to pay this, and this will now further push people into unemployment. This is a position that government will not want to have. Whereas Labour is also keen on the take-home pay of about 1.2 million workers of the federal government. Only 1.2 million workers. The welfare of over 200 million Nigerians is also at stake. Therefore, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not only considering the plight of federal workers, there's only about 1.2 million, but is also concerned about the welfare of the other 200 million Nigerians. This is because the federal government's guiding principle is affordability, sustainability, and the overall health of the nation's economy. The federal government, therefore, calls on all parties to embrace reasonable and realistic dialogue that will result in proper resolution of the impasse. Even before the discussion on the national minimum wage, you recall that the federal government has put in a number of measures to cushion the hardship that is experienced by Nigerians, especially the federal workers. One of it is the 35,000 wage award, which was supposed to last for 6 months, which the federal government now says can continue until the new national minimum wage is arrived at. Other intervention programs are the 125 billion naira conditional grant and financial inclusion of medium and small-scale enterprises. There is also 100 billion naira that the federal government set aside in the first instance for the procurement of not just the CNG-fueled buses, but also the procurement of conversion kits and the setting up of conversion centers. 25,000 naira was also awarded by the federal government to be shared to 15 million households for 3 months. That process is still ongoing. You know what has happened at the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. The federal government has had to suspend this program temporarily, but it has now resumed and it is ongoing. 185 billion naira worth of palliatives, meaning loans to states, to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal has also been granted by the federal government. There is also 200 billion naira support to the agricultural sector to cultivate over 500,000 hectares of land to boost food production and food security in Nigeria. Remember also that the federal government released 42,000 metric tons of grains from its strategic grain reserve to also cushion the effect of prices of farm produce. There is also the purchase and onward distribution of 60,000 metric tons of rice from the Rice Millers Association. Also, there is a recent increase of between 25 and 35% on all consolidated salary structure of federal workers in Nigeria. The federal government has also given a 90% subsidy on health costs for federal civil servants through the NHIS scheme. In the last 1 week, about 60,000 student loan applications were also received, out of which already about 30,000 were successful for the National Education Loan Fund that was recently launched by Mr. President. Also know that the light rail commissioned in Abuja recently by Mr. President is aimed at relieving Nigerians, especially the workers, of transport costs, and this has been extended till the end of the year. In addition to all this, the federal government has also granted all of its workers approval to include ICT in the alternate sources of income that they seek to have, meaning that in addition to the right by all workers to engage in agricultural production, agricultural processes, workers are also have been given permission to also engage in ICT services to boost their income. These are all some of the measures that have been put in place by the federal government to ensure that workers get the best out of this country. But I need to reiterate that it is not only the federal workers that should enjoy the dividends of our democracy. Nigeria is made up of over 200 million people, and all of them must partake in whatever is available for Nigerians. I'm therefore appealing to the organized labor, especially the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, to see reason with the federal government. And let me also say that there is a persuasive expectation by Nigerians on the organized labor to see that they return to the negotiating table so that we have a meaningful wage regime for Nigerians. They are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are all Nigerians. The federal government respects the views of labor, but we also want them to see reason with the federal government in the interest of the prosperity that we want this nation to achieve. There are three parts to that tripartite committee: government, the organized private sector, and the organized labor. Two of that part, which is two-thirds, are already in agreement. It is only labor that has not yet accepted that position. What we expect them to do is to go back to the negotiating table and continue to make their case. I am not in the tripartite committee meeting sitting here now. It is not for me or for any other person for that matter to recommend whatever it is for the tripartite committee. So we urge on labor, the organized labor, to go back. The federal government didn't start with 60,000. They started somewhere. Labor itself started elsewhere. But it is important to see why government and the organized private sector took this position. At 60,000 naira per month as minimum pay for workers, this will cumulatively cost Nigerian taxpayers 9.5 trillion naira in both salaries and consequential adjustments that you will have in pensions and other entitlements. You can see the gravity of the situation yourself. So we urge the organized labor to look at these figures and go back to the negotiating table and try to convince the other two parts of the committee to see reason. At the end of the day, it is not the president that is taking, that has, said that you pay 60,000. It is the position of two parts of the tripartite agreement. We urge them to go back there